Greetings, everybody. Sorry about the slow start there, but we had a little problems getting the stream to initialize today. I think we've been having issues with internet and StreamYard somewhat today. Here's hoping that we get back to where we're all set up. I do apologize for the additional trouble we had getting that set up, but hopefully everything will pop up as we had hoped. And hopefully we'll be all right and working all right and able to stream as we usually would today. I know we've had some outages recently, and I'm going to talk about that, but I do want to say I'm happy to have you guys here where we can talk about all sorts of things embroidery as we are wont to do. And today we'll be kind of cleaning up some questions people had from previously. I'll be talking about the stream and where we're headed from here and why I was out last week and what that means. Nothing major. We're still going to be here before I go too far. And then we'll be getting into a discussion of what the kind of consensus is, or at least my idea of the consensus for what you should use for software for drawing and for like raster and vector artwork outside of embroidery, preparing art for embroidery. Going on to talking very briefly about when you should redraw for embroidery. These are from some viewer questions that I had that I thought would be real quick recaps. And then I had a couple of designs from earlier episodes that people wanted me to recap and discuss and tear down a little bit, including one that's from the wall of shame behind me, the New Mexico Titans design, which is a mascot design I talked about recently in a mascot show. And somebody wanted me to actually do a replay of that one and explain it. So I'm going to do a little bit of design breakdown too. So it's kind of a catch-up day. It's a little bit of everything. Probably not a very long show, but a show where we can get ourselves together, get our feet wet, talk about some embroidery, talk about some settings. I'll also be talking very briefly about grading it, something that I've covered very many times, and I've offered up as a class. I'm going to briefly probably touch on that as well, because that's another thing somebody wanted me to play through. And these are topics that are entirely as large videos previously in the stack before us, in the backup of the Takeup. But in that catalog, we have tons of these things talked about, but we had specific questions where people wanted to see stuff. And so this is the big follow-up. This is me answering the mail. This is me catching up and letting you guys know what's going on. But first, I'm going to go ahead and talk to everybody who is live, because as you guys know, though I love you guys who are on the replay squad, and you can skip this if you don't want to hang out for the comments. If you're here live, I like to say hello. So for those of you who have joined me live today, let's go ahead and run through and talk to everybody. First one is Cindy King, who says, Good afternoon, Cindy. Happy to have you in here. Debbie is in as well from New York. Hello, Debbie. We got Doug coming in, I know, out there in LA. Hello, everybody. Love to see you guys talking to each other. But you got some things going on. Cindy's only going to be able to hear us. Well, the replay later will be more interesting if you get interested in the designs that we're talking about, but that's not a problem. Everybody talking to each other, which I love. And yes, stream had some trouble, so you had me popping in for a second. They're telling you I'd be on shortly, but here we are. We're back. Brent is here saying, hello, embroidery peoples from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Happy to have you in. We have Ron coming in from Milk River. Love that. Got Jesse, always strong on Replay Squad, saying hi, Eric. Doug saying, hope you're fully recovered. Just to let you know, I wasn't out being sick last week. I will say this, not fully recovered voice-wise. Whatever I caught in January wrecked my voice, wrecked my ability not to cough. So I may have to hit the decorated tumbler, this time featuring the Two Regular Guys podcast, which I was producing this morning. But certainly I am recovered as much as I'm going to be recovered, I think, for a while as we heal from the cough that I had all that time ago. But luckily, it's not why I was gone last week unexpectedly, and I'll tell you about that shortly. Lots of people saying hi. Barb from Minnesota Custom Made saying hi, Eric. TMC Mom coming in from Texas. Thank you for being here as well. And everybody on the other side of the room working, keep those needles moving. That is what you should be doing, and I will never blame you for it. If you want to come back and check stuff out on the replay squad, you need to see something that's on screen, then come back and do that later. That's not a problem. You'll get enough out of the talking, trust me. And a lot of things I'm going to talk about at the beginning of the show today really are just questions that we can answer verbally. I will put things up on screen. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the only way to understand. I like to give something to the listeners as well as the watchers. And hopefully you guys will enjoy that. And by the way, Doug says, and I agree, Two Regular Guys guest was excellent this morning. Yeah, she was. Go check that out. Excellent stuff about business to business selling. So go check out the Two Regular Guys podcast. Also available on YouTube. It's the Regular Guys podcast. And that's with Aaron Montgomery and Terry Combs. And I pop on there pretty often, but also I am the producer for that. So feel free to check that out. Love that. Like I said, you'll find stuff from me all over the place, but certainly you're finding me there all the time. But with that, let's get into the stuff we actually said we would talk about, or at least I said we would talk about today, and get everybody kind of back on track with everything. Number one, let's go ahead and just do a quick take-up catch-up. I know we have had some blips in the schedule this last while. The first time, as you guys know, I went out to Impressions Long Beach and came back from the Impressions Expo with a horrific case of something awful in the chest. I had an illness that I picked up and I lost my voice for weeks and it was terrible. Well, truthfully, that kept on happening. That kept on happening kind of horribly off and on. We were losing my voice. I was coughing. I couldn't talk for very long. Even now, I'm still having problems with that. That did happen earlier this year, but what happened last week wasn't that. Turns out last week is a little bit more about my personal life to a degree and my family life. So what I'm going to tell you about is just a brief thing without telling you too much detail. I think family life should stay on the family side of things. However, if you guys don't know, my wife was in medical school, and this last week was the end of the official kind of waiting on the end of medical school. She's about to graduate. So it was match week. If you don't know what match week is people who are going to be doctors after they do their medical school rotations have to match with a residency. And matching with a residency means that you are going to be placed in a program, and they put you in this big kind of hopper where you say, here's all the places I want to be. And they say, here are all, and all those people in all these different programs say, here are the people that we want that we interviewed. And then they go through and some magic happens in the middle that makes no sense to me. And they match you with that program. Sometimes you match where you want to, sometimes you don't, or at least you match maybe not with your first choice. And some people don't match at all. So the thing that I'm going to say is my wife matched. So that's a really great thing. That is an excellent thing. And so I decided kind of last minute, she was very gracious. It was like, you can do your show, but it was match day. It was a stressful day. Lots of things were going on and she wanted me to be present for it. And I'm sorry that I didn't stop and get to post with you guys, but it was really close to when the show went on. Made a last minute decision to stay with my wife and find out what was going on for match day. So I will go ahead and say, since Doug has offered this up, and I fully agree, Doug says, congratulations to your wife. A lot of hard work. Yes. My doctor wife is a very impressive human being. She and I met in my education as well, but she went on to do quite a bit more than I did. And as you guys know, armed with my degree in medieval studies, I came here to do embroidery, but hey, I was doing embroidery already. Suffice it to say, my lovely wife, Celeste, she did indeed match. However, there's something that happens when you match. We thought we'd be staying in our beautiful New Mexico, which is where I am from, where she is from, and where our house is. And it turns out we are not. Where we matched was not in New Mexico and not even close. I will be moving across the country. I will let you guys know where that is later. That is something that's, it's not necessarily private, but it's one of those things where we are still shaking out exactly where we're going to end up. But let me just say, I will be a very, very much closer to the East Coast, more than I've ever been before, and living further away from New Mexico than I ever have, aside from the time I spent in Iceland. So incredibly far move and very fast. If you guys don't know, from the day of match day to when you move is, 60 to 75 days before you start. So it means that we have to pick up our entire lives and move across country. So what this means is I'm going to be way closer to the East Coast. Here's the radius I'll give you. I am 3 hours away from many of the world-class cities of the East Coast. So I'll be much closer to New York City than I will be here. Suffice it to say, rough times for me because there is a part of it. I am someone who has always been very much a Southwestern guy. I'm a desert guy, and I'm not used to this. I'm excited for the new adventure. I'm mostly excited for my wife because she's going to be with a program that really loves her and really values her highly, and she was excited because we were very much weighing, like, are we going to be happy to be staying here? Are we not? What's going to be going on? How do we feel about that? And there was a lot of stress because I wanted to stay here to be with my dad is here and he's elderly, but lovely, lovely dude, and wanted to stay with him. Luckily, it's only 3 years. We might move back. We don't know what's going on, but for that 3-year period, we will be out there. I'll let you guys know when it becomes more, uh, also become more a part of what's going on with the show. Because the other thing is, it moves all of our schedules differently. I do this particular time slot because it was good for me at the time. Um, but when I am on the East Coast all the time, it might change some timing for me. So we'll see. I don't think I'll probably change this time slot, but right now I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, as you guys do know, and I will be in the Eastern time zone after a while here soon. So it means that I will not be here. It is it is something that I'm not used to. I'm a town boy. I've been here all my life. I'm an Albuquerque, New Mexico native and have never really picked up and moved like this. And also a homeowner who didn't own a home till pretty late. And so we'll be picking up everything and moving real quick. And there's a lot of debating about how it's all going to happen with houses and stuff. So I know personal life stuff, not embroidery stuff. I usually don't share that. The reason I share it with you guys today is it does mean that in the next, 6 to 8 weeks, there may or may not be times that are disrupted for the show. I'm going to try and either pre record or be able to do something for you guys. If I can't, I would like to be much more forthcoming and letting you know, like, hey, this is not going to be a live session Friday, or it's not going to be at the same time where I'm going to have to change things. Long term, definitely going to be back on the show. Takeup's still going on. In fact, I think it'll be even stronger once I am somewhere new and get a little energy underneath me. And also because I will be in a new place where I don't have a lot of reason not to be out of the house when I want to get work done. And that means I'll probably be really dedicated to more of the work that I love to do in the embroidery world. And frankly, all winter long, I'll be stuck inside a little bit more because this is not the kind of place where it's very temperate during the winter. So, I'll be on the East Coast or closer to it, not on the East Coast, but I'll be closer to the East Coast by far. I'll be in the Eastern time zone. And we will see what happens with that as far as timing. I don't know if that's going to change anything. So far, probably not, but it might. So, like I said, in the immediate moment, it means that I may have some trouble with timing things and getting it right. Or if I am in the middle of making the literal 27-hour drive from here to there at some point, because we've got animals and other stuff that is not going to travel in a moving container, then in that period of time, I may have to tell you guys that the take-up is off. After we get done with that, when we are settled back in a little bit, Takeup's back on, won't be a problem. And I am going to try and do pre-recorded stuff, maybe some interviews in the interim so that we have something here, but it may not be that the entire live crew will be here with you, or I won't be here live and you guys will be chatting with each other in the comments during like a YouTube premiere. If you guys don't know a premiere, it's where a pre-recorded video comes out, plays as if it's live, and you still get to chat in the comments with each other and have this awesome community that we built. So that's what happened. I was gone last week because it was match day. The other thing is looking ahead, I kind of already said Takeup's going to be on. In fact, I have projects I want to do that are coming up that should be awesome. Great stuff with products from Embrilliance that I really want to explore, as well as just good old fashioned digitizing and embroidery stuff that I haven't had a chance to do that I want to do, that I've been planning on, and I'm going to make this a priority. I've started to really realize the time we have is not something we can take for granted, and I want to make sure we all have a chance to get at those nuggets of information that are in the back of my head, and also to explore some new stuff that I haven't done before. So we'll be doing more. That's the thing to say. We'll be doing more. I will let you know if we have some disruptions, and I appreciate all the wonderful comments. So we'll go ahead and grab some folks, and we've got people talking to each other, which I love. So it's fantastic. A lot of people are chatting, and it's great. So I will go ahead and say there's some good stuff. Everybody's saying congratulations. We've got Barb saying congratulations to my wife. Absolutely. Jesse, thank you very much. Yep, I am definitely moving via in LA. Where am I heading? I'll tell you that in a little bit, because right now we have a cluster of towns around the place we're located. I'll let you know when I know. When everything gets qualified and houses purchased and deed is signed, I'll let you guys know a little bit more about where I'm going. I'm being coy for right now, but the people who need to know most know, but it's still going. TMC Mommy says, congrats to her. A lot of match day reels on my feed lately. Love seeing all these amazing people and where they're heading. Absolutely. And my wife, who's going into emergency medicine, is an absolute unit. She's fantastic. She does all the stuff that people can't stand to do and is really out there helping people. And it's awesome to see her get what she should be getting. And she has always been so supportive of me. How could I not want to be behind her and support her as we go through this next part of our lives and let her have a chance to have the career she wanted and that she's been working toward the same way I got to and the way she supported me traveling all around and teaching you guys. So definitely happening. Barb says, what a great adventure. Absolutely. DJ Kev says, welcome to the East. Hopefully I'll get a chance to shake your hand someday, DJ Kev. Yeah, Doug says, hoping you were going to be on the West Coast. Yeah, that was actually not much of an option with what's going on, but still, I will still be going out to the West Coast. The likelihood that I will be going out to the Long Beach shows is still pretty high, even despite what happened last time. I'll just make sure that I'm being very good with my hand washing, I guess. I don't know how that happened, but hey, try not to get anything bad happening. Jesse says, welcome to the East Coast. Thank you much. Hopefully we get to see people out. And love to see everybody talking. It's so awesome. DJ Kev says, I was in the military. I know all about picking up your life and moving. It's a cool experience. I appreciate that, man. I had a hard time adjusting to the thought. So I appreciate the heads up and kind of the pep talk about that. Like I said, I'm a town guy. I'm a guy who's really from my state and really kind of I'm from this dirt right here. I've got family here and from this dirt. So it's hard for me to get up and get moving, but I'm also somebody who really likes to see new things and experience new things and meet new people, see how they live. So I'm excited to get myself out of that. So very cool stuff here. Crystal says, happy to have you on the East Coast. Love it. Susan says, ESD, great for me. We'll figure it out. Like I said, I'm not too concerned, but we'll figure it out. Like I said, hard to move from the desert, but hey, we'll get there. Eric, congrats to you and your wife. That's fantastic. So excited for you all's life ahead. Thank you, Cindy. I am too. And honestly, if you guys know for docs, they spend a lot of time in school. And frankly, the hard part is you don't get paid. You don't get paid until residency. So you're really just digging in your heels and doing what you can until you get to that point. And she really deserves to be compensated for the work she puts in, though honestly, she does it for the love of healing people and helping people who need help. And especially in the world that she lives in, there are people who are having their worst day and she gives them their best chance. And you really can't argue with that. All right. So we've done that. Let's get back to the embroidery world. I know that, the I wouldn't call it, it's not cheesemate. It's not like we're, it's not gossip. It's not a bad thing going on, but everybody likes to hear about people's personal stuff. Like I said, I don't usually talk mostly about personal stuff, aside from the fact that it really will affect how we go on in the future. And certainly there's very likely to be a missed show or at least a pre-recorded show between here and there. I can't imagine we will not end up there. The cool thing is it also means I get to go see some new experiences and go. I mean, honestly, what I keep on getting excited about is I'm probably 3 hours from several big cities that probably have some museums and examples of embroidery that I've never gotten to see and all kinds of art and inspirational stuff going on. So I'm excited. That and being the complexion I am, despite being from the desert, it's obvious from the spots on my face. I get out in the sun and get toasted up. It'll be nice to get out and hike under some trees once in a while instead of just desert time. So maybe I'll get my hiking on and get my feet under me a little bit more often. So I like that. But anyway, lots of cool stuff happening. We'll move on from that. Let's get back into the mail in makeup. So I had some questions. I have not been able to answer everybody. If you guys who have not heard from me via email are wondering why, now you know. Things have been very hectic. Got to sell a house, pack a house, buy a house, move into a house, and do that, 27 hours away by car. It's a lot going on right now and everything's kind of crazy and doing a lot of home repair stuff like that. So that's why you haven't heard from me. But I have still been in the embroidery world, dipping my feet into everything I should be. My toes are definitely in the pool and I'm definitely talking to a lot of folks, but I haven't been able to answer all the questions I wanted to. So with that, we're going to do a couple of questions that you guys have asked me. I'm not going to name names because I forgot to ask these people ahead of time if I could share what they were concerned about. So frankly, I am going to talk about these questions without naming names. If you're somebody who I'm naming your question, feel free to talk about it in the comments if you want to. Otherwise, just realize that I'm trying to answer your question without necessarily exposing that you were the one who asked it if I don't ask ahead. Suffice it to say, the first question I had, somebody asked me, how do we choose vector or raster software? So as someone who is primarily an embroiderer, what reasons would you choose one piece of software over another? And so we know vector and raster software, if you're in this business for any period of time, Vector art is something that is a drawn piece of art. It uses vector, it expands and contracts and can resize and be edited. So vector lines, nodes, and lines very much like digitizing. So we're thinking things like Adobe Illustrator, Corel Draw, Affinity, uh, as Affinity Designer, and the like, Inkscape, if you're talking about the free open source route. But that's what we're talking about with vector. With raster, we're talking about raster graphics, meaning a raster, a group of pixels. So anything that's going to produce raster graphics, we're talking about your Photoshops, your Corel photo, your Affinity photo, and the like, or GIMP if you want to go open source route on that, though there's plenty of others. What do we want to look for vector and raster software? And I'm just going to say that there's several reasons why we might want each particular package. And I'm just going to give you those reasons and then let you know what I did when I was at the shop. So when I was working at Black Duck and the other shops I've worked at, because actually we're all very similar layouts, multi-decoration shops. So decorating with multiple techniques and technologies, decorating mostly for a business to business crowd, though we were also doing business to customer and certainly team sports, schools, everything like that. So mid-size city shops, that's where I worked. There's that venue. And then I'll talk about what I do now, where I'm working for Brilliance. I'm making assets that primarily I'm going to digitize, or I'm doing things like product and design layout, advertisements, and production, things like that I do from Brilliance. So there's both sides of that. I'm going to talk about the kind of two sides and why they actually result in me choosing differently about the different software that I run. So the first thing we're going to talk about briefly is just in general, we know what vector and raster software are. So why would you choose one over the other, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add my screen here because I do have a couple softwares where I can pull them up and just have them on screen if we want to talk about them. Honestly, not necessarily germane. So if you're not looking at the screen, don't feel bad. You don't need to look at the screen exactly. This is mostly just me putting something on screen for the fun of it. But here's the thing: there are different reasons why we might want to choose these different software. So if we decide that we're choosing a specific software, it's usually because we have something in mind that we're trying to achieve, right? So right now, what you're looking at on screen here, we have a piece of vector art that's in Affinity Designer, right? So Affinity Designer 2, this is just a piece of SVG artwork. This is a piece of artwork that I did myself. And actually, this was originally in CorelDRAW. It's been exposed and exported out into SVG. So now it's editable because, of course, it has all the points from SVG art as it is. And honestly, it was done in a column style, very much like embroidery. This particular piece was not done with strokes. It was drawn in an alternating column style. So very much like an embroidered piece. And I actually did that on purpose to show somebody that you can draw vector the way you draw embroidery and still get something useful. So it's one of my goofy little Viking Age style designs. So very much like an Urness style design here. The thing is, the way these function, this is a vector drawing software. If I'm making art for myself, the choices really aren't as critical. Vector drawing software largely works similarly in every case. So Affinity, which is a design software you can buy once, and though they have major upgrades you pay for, it's not a subscription service. That's really why people usually choose Affinity. We'll get to that. But when we're looking at this software, it doesn't look particularly different as far as function to something like CorelDRAW. This was originally done in CorelDRAW, and in this case, here we have CorelDRAW, and this has the same points. If we look at it, the same control points are there. Certainly, I don't have them zoomed in where they're quite as large. I haven't adjusted my CorelDRAW for streaming because it's something I usually don't bring up on stream. But if we zoom in really closely, we can see that we have control points that are on opposite sides of each one of the kind of node areas on this column, on each of these columns for that same art. So really, do we have anything particularly different here? No. I mean, the truth of the matter is, if we were just talking about, drawing vector art, so we have something we can draw in for ourselves to make our own art, most vector software is going to be capable. CorelDRAW, Adobe Illustrator, and Affinity are really top choices. Honestly, if you're doing it for yourself, if that's your purpose, if that's the primary thing you're doing, well, if that primary purpose is I'm going to draw clean artwork for myself, layout type, put type on logos, things of that nature, hey, CorelDRAW or Affinity or any of those is going to be fine. And frankly, you're just going to choose something for probably a different reason. If you are doing something just for yourself, you don't expect to take on customer art. You're not trying to open art from other sources that aren't um, portable. If you're going to just be working with SVG art or something from some other source, even let's say we're doing stock art, then maybe you don't care so much, because honestly, the functionality of moving nodes around is really similar in all of them. Yes, there are tools that are better or worse in each one, but if it really is custom drawing some light text layout, which is most of the stuff we're doing for embroidery, you're not probably doing crazy gradient meshes. You're probably not doing a bunch of special effects. You're probably not doing 3D extrusions. Embroiderers mostly need these packages to draw clean vector art or to clean something up, which we're going to talk about again in the concept of when do we redraw art. So if your primary purpose is to draw your own art, or if you're usually opening files from people who, number one, either have made all these files in a portable format like SVG or something you can open, or are able to, are savvy enough to provide you with a file like that from the original file, you're working with designers who can convert out. Most embroiderers are not going to be as concerned, or at least they won't have to. If you are embroidery primarily, the problem that comes in where we are not primarily embroidery, or if we're not all embroidery, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put myself back up on screen here larger. Once we are doing more print work, then we have things like color management. Then we have things like all of the wonderful effects we can get out of Illustrator. Then we have things that reach into kind of raster production or raster-like production effects, shadows, highlights, transparencies, these things that you might do for a print piece that you're really not going to do as much for an embroidered art source. So then we might have a different primary purpose here, or at least we might have a different secondary purpose, even if our primary purpose is to work with art. And in fact, what usually ends up happening when we talk to people in the embroidery world, if you are working at a company like the companies I've worked at, the primary problem we have is compatibility with customer files. Because despite the fact that we do have some crossover, and I'm going to talk about that again in a second, you really have, just like embroidery to a degree, it's lesser, but to a degree, you have these primary working files, the native file to each software suite, and you can't really open them in other software suites and always get exact results. Especially things like gradients have a tendency to fall apart. Special effects that are not solely based in the language of the vector, those things fall apart more often, even if they have some compatibility, which they often do. They attempt compatibility. So compatibility with customer files can be the other half of it. If your files themselves are simple, if they are made for embroidery, this still may not be necessarily a killer for you. Most people are probably going to be getting files from a designer, often out of Illustrator. What I've found for myself so far is that Affinity, which is the kind of dark horse in this race, they absolutely have done a decent job of importing Illustrator files without much trouble. I haven't been working with CorelDRAW files with them, or attempted it, so I can't tell you off the top of my head if they fall apart or not, or if exported files come over well from, say, like PDF formats out of Corel. But by and large, I've been doing pretty decently with Affinity. So what we end up doing is this. If you are in a shop like these shops I was, where you are going to be getting work from all these different places and from different, maybe hired on designers, then you need to run the design software that other designers or that your customers are most likely to export in. In the case of these shops, I ran everything. You cannot imagine the number of subscriptions we had. We ran Adobe Illustrator and CorelDRAW, and I was often running other software packages, depending on either what was current in the community of people who I was serving, or if I needed a special feature from them, up to and including running Inkscape, which is an open source piece of software, because I found that when I had trouble with SVGs, it ran to the SVG spec, and it was more often likely to open up a malformed SVG or an SVG that was coming in weird, causing strange effects when I brought it into Illustrator or CorelDRAW. Now, they have gotten much better, obviously, and it's been generations since then. But I often ran all of the above. That's the thing, though. in a shop where that is your bread and butter, is you are getting customer art files. You want to open them natively and be able to make small changes or to resize or layout or whatever. And you want that native file to be editable, or you have to export your own files into um, files that the customer is going to use with other providers, sign shops, maybe banner printers, people. If you don't service that particular need, but you are servicing their art or design needs, then we have to have increased compatibility. Then we have to worry more about it. Now, CorelDRAW has been around in the world of embroidery and print for a very long time. So lots of printers are more likely, garment printers specifically, garment embroiderers, we are more likely to run CorelDRAW than the rest of the world. Everybody else is running Adobe Illustrator. And Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop especially now have a lot of AI options that are not available in the other packages. So if you are creating art and you want to explore the easiest version of bringing AI into that process, if that's something that is important to you, then Illustrator or Photoshop, the Adobe suite, is going to be important to you as well. It's going to be something you want to mess with. If otherwise you are working with compatibility customer files and you have lots of files who are using those file formats, you're still going to be in that boat. However, what I am going to say is if you are primarily an embroiderer, you are not doing full color print with, effects and shading and all of the stuff that might come with that. Then you might roll to the cost of ownership and say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and buy into the Affinity world. And Affinity does open Illustrator files pretty decently. I'll open those up. I will kick out a raster or a PDF or some other preview that I can trust, send it back to the customer to make sure that nothing has happened with the file. And if they like that file, if that looks correct to them, I can use Affinity to do my primary work. That's kind of where I think lots of people have ended up. And I will also admit this. The other thing that happens is you end up with legacy files. So not even compatibility with customer files. It can also be compatibility with earlier files. Let's say you worked in Illustrator or CorelDRAW or something previously, but have lapsed. You are no longer at a current version and you've decided, hey, it's time to upgrade. You may find that that's the reason to go back to the original software. However, like I said, with older Illustrator files and simple Illustrator files, I've found that Affinity has done a pretty good job. So, like I said, it really is a different world, right? That's the concept. We don't know for sure what's going to happen with each file. And like I said, things like really complicated gradients have a tendency to fall apart more. So when we're talking about, like I said, compatibility with customer files or with our own older files, crossing from one suite to another can cause problems. But, when we get into the primary purpose being just art creation, laying out text ahead of time, opening simple design files, like you might find it, like the logo file I showed earlier, and I can pull that back up. Why not? This ARVC Sports Center logo, something like this, which is a pretty common level of detail and, and delicacy we'd have to handle with this piece. These are going to have very simple vector shapes that are not going to vary much and are editable and have the same kind of node types and drawing tools. And if we look at the kind of drawing tools that are here, our editing and our points and our, brush stroke stuff and shape editing and all of that, we see all that's over on the left-hand side. If I go pop back over to Affinity Designer, the same sorts of tools, the pen tools, the knife tools, the pencil tools, the stroke details, most of them are similar. They may have slightly different drawing styles. They may have different ways of handling nodes, but by and large, the way a Bezier works is the way a Bezier works. As we select a point, we are likely to get the same handles no matter what we do. And those points will be editable and those lines will be editable in a very similar way. It's where we get into more advanced tools, where we get into tools that promote more ease of use, that it matters. If you are someone who is drawing vector shapes by hand and that's your primary use, you have less problems. If you want AI assistance, if you want more processing, if you want additional help as far as tools that guide you or help you through that process, then the more expensive suites are generally going to give you more of that. And Illustrator might make more sense for you, but then you have to realize that you're on the hook for the monthly subscription. And if the cost of ownership for that doesn't work for you, I would highly recommend, if nothing else, to go ahead and check out something like Affinity, where it's back to the old school method of paying once and pay for major upgrades, but nothing else. And moreover, to take a look at what's out there and available. Hey, even in the free and open source world, if you're drawing for yourself, you can use Inkscape as well. I find that Affinity is a bit more polished and has a little bit better UI to my mind than Inkscape. Doesn't mean Inkscape's bad. I run Inkscape too and have had no problems with it, but ease of use can be a thing for that. And you may find if you're someone who wants more assistance with your drawing, then Illustrator or CorelDRAW may offer more of that, and Illustrator certainly is like the top end. The other thing I am going to say though, if you're somebody who goes back and forth to different computers that are on different operating systems, look for compatibility there. It's very much like in Brilliance. And Brilliance has native Mac OS, native Windows. That's been very important for a lot of people using in Brilliance because they can have the same UI and go back and forth between Windows machines and Mac machines. If we go to the level of the Affinity suite, Affinity also runs on iPad. So it runs on a non desktop OS. I don't love doing my work on an iPad all the time. I have a lovely iPad from that I do work for in Brilliance, and it's great. But I would say that certainly it's an acquired taste for doing major work, and you may not love it for that. It's great for sketching, great for doing some work, may not be the best for doing mass layout or other stuff unless you really are used to the metaphor of working on an iPad. Certainly a lot of modern artists are, a lot of digital artists do find it a little more comfortable. I still want a mouse and a keyboard and all of that. And certainly you can affect that on an iPad. Personally, I want to be on a full-size desktop or laptop computer and use that. Up to you, but I would also look at portability between these different OSs, that compatibility, and see if that makes any sense to you as well. So like I said, I like CorelDRAW, I like Illustrator, I like Affinity. They're all great. If you're starting from nothing, cheapest you're going to get in there, if we're talking about cost, is going to be Affinity. You can still buy a full tilt copy of CorelDRAW that isn't exactly a subscription, though I'll say that I bought that with an upgrade path thing that got converted to a subscription anyway. I ended up on a yearly subscription train, which is not super expensive, not like Illustrator, which is going to be the most expensive, but is still costly. I am on current CorelDRAW. Also, I'll say this: why am I on CorelDRAW for that? I actually find it to be really useful for publication and for box art, things like that. So when you're doing packaging or things like that, I really like CorelDRAW for that and for multi-page layout, because in the same world, without going to a separate publishing utility, because you can go, and Affinity has like a publisher also, without going into another publishing utility, CorelDRAW has the ability to do multi-page stuff. So if you're also going to be doing anything in print that is brochure-like, or you're doing any sort of packaging or anything like that, you're putting together a flyer or a leaflet or that kind of paper printing, then CorelDRAW has the additional ability to do multi-page layout in a way that is wonderful. Also, if you're printing in magazines or doing magazine ads, which is, I know, a little bit archaic, but that's still something a lot of us are doing too. So it really depends. It just depends on what your level of engagement is and what you really need. That's what I would say. So we got a couple more comments here. I'm going to bring a couple of these in. Barb says, CorelDRAW and I have a love-hate relationship. Yeah, I feel that. I started out in CorelDRAW, so I still kind of have a feeling for it. I'm way back in CorelDRAW 10 on a student edition, but at the same time, I like it for a lot of stuff. It is useful. But I would say when I catch myself drawing and working in a lot of that stuff, and including a lot of the raster stuff, I do not like Corel Photo. That is just 100%. I was a Photoshop guy. The first time I did raster editing was Photoshop. And I find myself now working in Affinity Photo, and I like Affinity Photo quite a bit. Miss Photoshop? Absolutely. Miss Illustrator too. But for the cost of it, I don't find it compelling for myself. She says, I work a lot in Illustrator and Photoshop. GIMP is a good open source program. Absolutely. GIMP is a good open source program. The GUI is a little rough. The UI is a little rough. So that's a little bit hard. Anyway, suffice it to say. Debbie says, welcome to the East Coast, FYI. Based on the job, however, there's physician home loan program. Yeah, I'll have to see about that. We may have something going on there. So that was about the personal stuff I talked about earlier. Son graduates in May and also changed states. Congratulations and good luck. Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it. And Joseph Eric over there, the Magic Touch. Good to see you, man. Congrats. Looking good, brother. I don't believe you, but thank you. And no, I'm not fishing for compliments, but hey, Joseph Eric is always the one who's looking good out there on this trade show floor. Say hi to him if you can. Well, worthwhile to go check out the Magic Touch booth always. And so Michelle Morrison Towner says, what about CorelDRAW compared to those? I have that. CorelDRAW is awesome. Fully fantastic. If you have CorelDRAW, stick with it. If you already bought it, stick with it. No problem. I love CorelDRAW. Used it primarily for most of my digital artwork for many years. Though I will say I do not like Corel Photo for photo editing. That doesn't mean you can't. Nothing bad about it. Not trying to tell somebody you don't use it. I just don't like it. I hate the way it operates. There's something about it that for my muscle memory and everything else, I don't love it. At the same time, I have managed to get myself to like Affinity Photo, which is much, much cheaper rather than being in Photoshop, though I do miss Photoshop features. And certainly as I watch everybody play with the Photoshop AI, there are lots of things I would not do with AI. The creative stuff I wouldn't do, but some of the photo cleanup stuff, yeah, I wish I was doing the content aware fill stuff. Sounds pretty awesome. And I do miss that sometimes and want to get into that. Anthony Joe says, I work in Inkscape and GIMP too, but don't do anything super sophisticated. But like it or not, Adobe is the Mac Daddy. Yeah, Adobe has the top pricing for sure. It has the top pricing and the top tools. That was a Freudian slip. I was going to say top tools first. But yeah, both. Lisa says, yes, CorelDRAW for brochures and packaging was easy for me to work with. Absolutely, me too. And I've done this before when I used to run my student groups back in the day in college. I did all of my brochures and flyers and publications in CorelDRAW because it really just does a very good work. And Lisa says, old folks here start with CorelDRAW 3 and just toss those original manuals and discs. Yeah, probably got that one. And Michelle says, I'm still learning. I've used Corel Paint Shop Pro for years. Paint Shop Pro is better than Photo, which comes with the Draw suite. CorelDRAW is so new to me doing vector work. Learning digitizing helped me, I think. I need lessons, someone to teach me. Hey, hang around. I might not be direct lessons, but yeah. We can talk about that. Then I can do some live vector and live drawing. Also, I'll say this, even though it's all in Adobe Illustrator and often with plugins, go check out Von Glitchka, and I will actually throw that up on screen. Learning from Vaughn, I actually took some courses that Vaughn put together, and I will hopefully put his name here right. I'm hoping I do. Go look up Von Glitchka. And there's a book that he did years ago called Vector Basic Training. It is still awesome. I think he may have changed the name of that now, and I might try and stop and look that up because I think it is worthwhile. In fact, I will do that. I'm going to see if we can look up his book because, yeah, Vector Basic Training is still out there. So let me pull that up on screen for you. It's on a thrift book site. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to show you what the book looks like. So if you can get a copy, it's worth getting a hold of. And also just his classes in general. He also does live drawing. Von Glitchka will teach you things about drawing that will absolutely make vector make sense to you. So this is the man's name, Von Glitchka. He is a classic graphic designer, but he also does like illustration. He calls himself a draw designer. So somebody who works with drawing first and then moves to the digital world. So this is the book that I love. It's called Vector Basic Training. This, if you can find it, is fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and put that back off screen for a second so I can see if I can find. He's got I think it's called People Process Love is the channel that he has on YouTube that is fantastic. So let me try and grab that too. I know I'm doing this live, which is not the best live content ever, but hey, that's how it is. Let's see if we can get Glitchka Studios is his other website, but love his stuff. So let's get Von Glitchka and try and grab his YouTube here too, because he really is worthwhile to check out. So I'll try and get my stuff here. Yeah, People Love Process. So let me go ahead and grab that and put that on screen as well. Because I want to do Vaughn a good turn. Because like I said, I think though I was doing vector already, his work has helped me get my vector much cleaner. After he explained vector in a way that made sense to me, I think my vector got a lot cleaner. And I would say because of that also, when I digitize with vector style tools, so with Bezier with vector style tools, and because now I work on things like fonts for Brilliance that you may have used, they have to be a lot cleaner and more precise than the stuff you would do for one size for a logo. And so my vector style work and the stuff that has to be resized is much cleaner too. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this into the comments for you guys who are here live right now. This is the YouTube channel, but if you go to see People Love Process, you go find Von Glitchka, you check him out on Instagram. These are his pages. He is an incredible vector artist. He has this as a draw over the shoulder video that's going on right now, this night logo, something that I would love to do for a mascot design, by the way. So Vaughn, if you're listening, if you want me to pick up some of your stuff. Also, those of you who are giant nerds, if you know the current Dungeons and Dragons logo that's out there, that is Von Glitchka's work. That's one where you might have seen his stuff before. But we've talked about the classic vector style logo. Here's him executing a brand overhaul on Fordham, and he did a great classic vector style logo. He's been in the business for a long time. One of the other things I really love he does are these unicursal or single line drawings, and lovely with a little bit of motion graphics there from Vaughn, the Alfred Hitchcock there. But yeah, worthwhile if you're trying to figure out your vector, you want to learn more about it. Check out Vaughn, see what he's got going on. Check out the People Love Process channel. And also, I've talked a bit about it on my channel too. If you want to see me talking about drawing and digitizing for vector artists, we've had that on our channel many times as well. So yeah, worthwhile. I think that's I always tell people, consume broadly and create with focus. The world of graphic design is our world too, as embroiderers, and we would actually benefit quite a lot. And I think I have benefited quite a lot from being a fan of graphic design. Now, being a logo guy like I am, logo design, graphic design, the applied arts of graphic art certainly are more important to me because that's my primary world that I like to live in is logos. Certainly that's something that has informed my work. Probably why you see less shaded, less painterly work from me, and you see more of this because that's what I love. That's what I love the most. But yeah, I would say my time spent learning about graphic design and fonts and typographers and how they draw, and people like Vaughn, illustrative designers, how they draw, has informed my work quite a bit, and I think made it a lot better and a lot cleaner. So there's that. Last couple of questions we had. One of the other ones was, when should you redraw customer art? That was another one of the mail-in questions that I didn't get a chance to get to. And I actually have a complete answer for you on this one. I'm going to take a slide directly from my Digitizing Your First Design, Founding Your Foundations class. So I'm going to pull this slide up and tell you exactly when I think it is the right choice to redraw customer art. So we're provided with customer art. When does it make sense to go in and either pay for or engage ourselves in redrawing that artwork for ourselves before we embroider? So I'm going to bring that up on screen and we are just going to talk it out because this is it. When should you redraw art? And in fact, I'll go ahead and see if I'm not too far in the way. I'm a little in the way, but here, when should you redraw art? I'll slide myself into the corner even further here. These are the answers for me, right? When the needs of the garment or of the embroidery as a medium necessitate major alteration to design. What do I mean by that? We're going to talk about that in a second, but it's when we have artwork that's just not going to fit in the space that it's given, when we have text that is so small it cannot be embroidered, not even with the thin threads, not even with the small needles, and we need to keep that text. We need to retain it, so we need to change that layout. When we have art that maybe needs an offsetting outline or a block of color or something else to set it off from a background or a print because it's not going to be visible. When the needs of the garment or the embroidery as a medium necessitate alteration to the design, it makes sense to redraw the art because it is a lot easier to draw some new vector and make vector edits and show previews than it is to redigitize a piece. So secondarily, poor quality art in which we can't see enough detail. If we are given the faded kind of cocktail napkin art, the poor art that does not look clean enough that we can tell where lines are, when we are given the incredibly low resolution 72 DPI version of a detailed logo and the lines are super unclear, and no matter how good we are at ferreting out where a line should be, we can't see it, then we draw that. Or if we are given a horrible piece of embroidery to reproduce, and even though the embroidery is not necessarily awful, it doesn't give us straight lines for our text, it doesn't give us round circles or properly shaped elements because it is either puckered or warped or the pull and push compensation haven't been accounted for, and we want clean versions to start from so that when we apply our own compensations for pull and push, we are doing that against the original art, so we try to get to a better result. then we might want to redraw that art and start from that clean place, especially when we're dealing with text, because frequently it'll be very hard to find top lines, base lines, and precise shapes. And especially if we're with a font where some of the characters in that art aren't super clear stylistically either. So, super poor quality art, that's a good reason to do it as well. And third, let's say the customer requires printed materials as well as the embroidery, whether that's garment printing or that's vinyl cutting or banners or whatever. And the artwork we have, even if we could guess, like we're good for embroidery, I can see the outlines well enough. It's working for me that way and it's not terrible, but I know that I'm going to take this art that's maybe good enough for a left chest design, but if I blow this up and put it on a banner or a billboard or a window treatment for the customer, or if I have vinyl cut for it, especially, I don't have clean vector of any kind. I've got raster art here. Then that makes good sense to redraw the art because we can sell that to them. And by the way, I'm not suggesting we do this without charging. Certainly build it into your process if you can when it's just about poor quality, but especially when we're giving them art to then take to a sign company, art to take from us somewhere else, especially if we've made some of these kind of case one changes and then case three comes up. So let's say we've made some changes to their art to make it better for embroidery and they decide I want everything to match. So the side of my truck looks like the left chest design that you altered or the cap design that you altered. Then we say, all right, cool. Let me offer you a service of giving you a piece that's going to work for printed materials. So these are good reasons to redraw your art, right? And I think those are the big three for me. I am going to explain those just a little bit with a couple more examples, but I think it is super worthwhile. And in this case, let's just kind of go over these, right? So we're evaluating art. We can worry about garment construction. Garment might have limited decorating area. The material might be unstable or light or fuzzy. We have to change things, or we have high contrast colors. Those things might be reasons why we have to change things. Here's where we have kind of poor art. The people over at Duke City, you've seen me show this before. They brought in a shirt that was so warped and so poorly stabilized and kind of poorly digitized to the point where what was supposed to be a circle in the center was a massive oval. And this, which is stretched to the nth degree in a hoop, is still crooked. Even after I spanned this back out in an embroidery hoop and scanned it, it still looks this crooked. For me, redrawing this was kind of a no-brainer because I wanted to start over from that. And then when I did my version, and I also, by the way, have an applique cut in here that I kind of hid, I was able to make the lines for that to digitize something very clean. And now I have a much cleaner, much better resolution or much better finish in my design. Predicated on the fact that I cleaned up the art ahead of time and I have a good circle and have straight text with clean lines that I know where it's going, rather than trying to scan this piece, zoom in, and just adjust as I go. Drawing from this, even though it's a very simple piece, I probably could have redone this in the software. Redrawing it first really made sense for me. Or if we make massive changes, in this case, we talked about this cap design many times for DVD designs. They originally brought me this piece on the left. On the right hand is what we ended up with in the end. Well, obviously, if I was working on that left-hand piece, and I said, hey, guys, for a cap, it's going to be really tiny and thin and what have you. And we worked it out and they decided they wanted this bust instead. Well, working with a edited piece of art, which is what I did first, I showed them the massive change before we went through with it. Rather than have to digitize this guy 3 times and draw a bunch of shapes in the pants that were never going to be used, I'm going to work on the art first and get the layout correct and then show that to them and say, hey, when you're ready, then we go to embroidery. And then last but not least, if you have a design where you're going to be going on different prints and different colors, you might want to work on the art first. Now, in this case, you're certainly seeing it done in embroidery. So this is already an embroidery files, these different elements, but hey, it's going on all these different prints. It's a high likelihood that there's changes to be made. You want to show them that first. So that's kind of, that's my take on when we should do these things. So just to make it clear again, those 3 elements are when the needs of the garment or embroidery necessitate alteration to design, draw first. When you have super poor quality art, either you can't see where it's supposed to be or something else is unclear about the interpretation or the raster is super low quality. Redrawing is a good idea and getting it cleared with the customer. And then certainly if you can sell the customer on printed materials, or let's say they want vector for vinyl cuts or something like that, or signage, by all means, redraw and then honestly sell them that process as another service. So that's one of the other mailbag kind of questions. So with that kind of out of the way, that was kind of the mailbag. Those are the two big questions people had. I know those aren't super embroidery related in a way. I mean, there really is a lot of kind of raster stuff involved in that. But I think it was worthwhile to say, hey, there are some differences to why you might make those decisions. And certainly it's worthwhile to think about not only why we would redraw, but then think about where we could offer a secondary service to our embroidery if we're going to go to the trouble of learning vector software, of purchasing vector software or raster software and working on our art. Well, if we then are asked to provide that art, let's find out what the value proposition is for us and for the customer and how we can get paid for it and make it make sense why we charge what we charge too. So all of those things kind of fit into that. So last but not least, you guys know we had a couple of designs that I got asked about, two of them. So we had a design wherein I have a big gradient that I've shown many times, a multicolor gradient, and they wanted me to replay of that again. We've done this in several shows, so I'm going to do that one actually second. Because the gradient thing, we have done entire shows on gradients. Go back and look up gradients and blending in the channel. I'm not saying we won't replay it here, and I can't talk about it briefly, but gradients show is a big topic that we've done several times. I may come back and do a more focused show on that if you guys really want me to dig into gradients one more time and how to do manual gradients and multi-layer gradients. We can do that. I'll do that replay last. So I know it was the first one I kind of mentioned today, but the other design I mentioned was one that is from the mascot show, and somebody just wanted me to play through that design. So I thought if we don't have the time for everything else, I will do that first. And that was one for Titans football. So I'm going to bring that up on screen again so you can see it. This is the design that was kind of asked for. So here I am again. This is the Titans football design that was asked for. I had showed it in one of the mascot shows, and I'd previously been asked, and people said, hey, can you run through it? Can you give us more of a look at how it's put together? How did you achieve just a little bit of shading in here? What are the different parts of it? Even though it's a simple design, somebody just took a liking to it and thought, can I have you break that down and show me what's interesting about this piece? So with that, let's go ahead and kind of get into this Titans design. First things I'm going to say is let's look at the design itself before we get into the file and just see some things and kind of identify them. What's interesting about this? What are things we might want to look at or reproduce? One thing that's not about the design at all, I'm just going to point this out. Depending on what software you're in, you're going to see either this is a bottom curve or you might find this called a bridge. So usually if we have this text up here that says Titans football and it has a curvature to the bottom line, the baseline, depending on what software you are in, you might get different answers as to what that is. So that for me, I often call it a bridge when I'm referring to it. It does not mean that's the only way to refer to text that has the bottom curve like that. And in fact, depending on where you're at, what software you're using, that can be different, but it usually is something that can be achieved with a setting. In the case of Embrilliance, since that is the software you guys know I'm working with them and for them, then that's something that's very easy to say. It is literally just the curvature on the bottom. I'll go ahead and pull that up since I can. If we have just some text where we want some curvature on the bottom, then we can see we can either do positive or negative curvature. Negative curvature on the bottom like that creates that arc, and that's all that is. So somebody asked me what you call that. This, to me, I often call this bridged. This comes out of old school graphic software that I was using that calls it a bridge, but I think it is useful knowing that rather than thinking of it as an arc. So we have that curvature there, and if we do a curvature on the top, that is an arc. That's an arc or a bridge. So this is an arc. If we zero that out, to me, that is a bridge. Now we have standard text, or we would have curved text, circular text, and that's the other kind of text that where we have a radius, and that's different. So that is circular text or text that's on an arced path. But for me, that's an arc. And otherwise, you have an arch or a bridge. And in this case, if we've got curvature top and bottom, that's going to be an arch. If we have no curvature on the top, but we have that negative curvature on the bottom, that's a bridge. That's the terminology I use. It's not the terminology everybody uses, but there is some differentiation there. Usually it's in regular type settings if you're using a font. And in the case of this particular design, it was just using a font. Top stuff was not. This stuff down here was. So that was a standard font at the time. Now, let's talk about the design itself. What do we notice about this design that's interesting, right? So if we're looking at this piece, what is interesting about it as far as stitch types and the way we digitize? Well, a couple things are interesting. We have shading in these background gray fills. And let me go ahead and grab pointer focus. You can see my pointer just a little bit better. I think that is worthwhile. Oh, it did crash, so never mind. If you can't see me jiggling a little pointer around, I guess we're not going to get it. Pointer focus died. Anyway, over here in the gray in the background, you can see around the edges that we had this kind of uh, charcoal gray going into the lighter silver gray, or the kind of a medium gray that we have. And down here we have a darker shade that has the edges of this background area darker. Thing to notice about that, these are fills, straight fills. However, they are layered. So we do have light density, dark gray that's running on top of this lighter gray. And over here, we can notice in the bottom half that it isn't super dense, and that the lighter gray, actually, we can see ahead of time, it's not as dense and has that darker gray filtering throughout it. So it's very likely this is a multi-layer thing without looking too much else into it. Other things we can see, the arm has kind of satin-like edges, but is still a fill, and it has a curvature. That means that this arm uses a curved fill for the base. It's got some shading over the top of it that looks to be manual stitches. But we see this satin-like edge on the fill. If you see a satin-like edge on a fill like that, that means it either has a high minimum stitch count or it has edge padding. Depending on your software, it may be different ways of calling that, but it'll either have a high level or a high number for edge pad or for minimum stitch in your fill. And when you have that, because we don't have really short stitches at the edge of the fill, those longer stitches give it a satin-like edge on a fill. It does mean there's usually kind of a divot just inside of that edge as it transitions to a more fill-like pattern, but it does give that kind of interesting look. And in this case, we do also have some curvature in that fill, I believe. And I may be wrong in my own file. I believe I've got curvature there. We see we have a curved fill in the helmet. We can see that the spikes on the helmet, these fins, are done in satin stitches that are separated. If we look at the hand that's up here, this fist, that we have each of the fingers is a separate satin stitch. When we look at kind of this vambrace, this guard on the forearm and wrist and hand of our gladiator, we can see that we have a separate satin column for kind of the band at the edge, and then 3 satin columns overlapped that make up the forearm and the hand, with a cross kind of brace on the wrist that has a 90-degree turned satin column. And we're getting this cool ridged effect that looks like multiple plates or like embossing because we have these overlapped satins. We have a length limit long satin for the back of the hand here. Instead of multiple satins, we have one length limit or auto split satin in the back of the hand. So we have, again, edge padding or a minimum stitch length that's pretty high. So we have very bright satiny edge, but we also have long stitches that are broken in the back of the hand. We also can see in the trident that we have 3 satin stitches making up. These 2 barbs are individual satin stitches that turn into the corners. And then we have another satin stitch for the central bar of the trident that kind of continues out back here as well. And then the other thing to look at is in this wave-like pattern that also creates the border of the design, we are using multiple overlap satin stitches, which results in these interesting shapes here. Certainly we have these little barbs that go under the main curves. And then we can see that we've built up to this largest radiating curve that then comes back around. And we've done this in multiple pieces so that it looks almost like it is on top of itself going into this curvature. So we're going to look at the sequence of all this stuff in the actual design. But this is what's interesting. We can see that we've got full density satins in different directions to provide kind of play of light. We've got these different overlapped sections to provide kind of that embossed look. Here in the vambraces and in the wrist, we've got curved fills with the satiny textures, as well as satin edges on things and some other interesting stuff. Also, we have this eye here, which is a void, actually. That's a gap inside of an outline that actually is a separate satin inside of that eye in the helmet. But all these little details together make a fairly nice figural piece, right? If we zoom out and look at it, this is a small piece that was done on caps and on left chests. And this is the left chest version of it that was done. And it's just kind of a nice little piece that has a lot of visual detail despite not being super, super shaded. We've got some color shading in this background and some color shading on the arm, but that's about it. Everything else is done with the play of light on the piece. So those are the things we can notice just looking at it. But let's go ahead and pull up the actual design, and we're going to replay that And so let's go ahead and look at the design itself. It's going to look like the shading is quite a bit darker. The preview is just different, and we can see the shading much darker than we would in the original. So just kind of be aware of that as we switch into the replay. But here is the original one more time, and we can go ahead and zoom in on that guy. We'll give him a little bit more zoom one more time and kind of just take a look at him. There's our fellow here, the Titan. And then here is the file, and here's the entire file as it is. First couple things I'm going to notice before we even zoom in. You can see that we've left gaps for push compensation up here in the fins, on the back of the trident, at the tips of the trident, at the tips of these kind of wave-like satins that make up the border. We have gaps that are there. So we are very particularly set up for these little gaps that are going to be there at the ends of these satins, where we have this very perfect kind of straight stitch, running stitch outline. We know we have to leave gaps so that we don't blow out in the angle of push. It's not going to push beyond those borders. But let's go ahead and take off our preview for a second. We can start to look at how this is constructed, right? So let's get into our replay, and we'll start playing through the design. First thing to notice, done for a hat. So we have the kind of hat splat here. We have the leaf shape or the tree, whatever you want to call it, that sews down the area underneath the hat logo and keeps that hat flat and attached to the stabilizer. That's the first thing we notice. Then we see that the bottom gray is done. First thing to notice on this, super light densities over a tatami underlay or a perpendicular underlay. What are we going to notice? Half density and then another half density coming back. What's this? This is for blending. When the darker gray comes on, because we have so much of it in this fill, I've left space for another density. In fact, these are not half density. I think they're third density passes. I've left space for another third of the density to come in from the dark gray because I don't want it to be overly bulky or dense. And there's a lot of shading in here. Whereas I haven't done that further on, and we're going to see that in a moment here. As we go up to this fill, we have a pretty full density fill. Why is that? Because I'm only doing some light shading around the edge mostly. There's not as much extra density going on top of that. And so I thought it wasn't really worth trying to play with coverage and leave that out. Whereas on the bottom right, we're coming in with a full additional blended density of the dark gray. So let's start looking at that. First, on the top, you're going to see a randomized, so a feathered edge or random edge, light density fill in that charcoal, coming in just to get the edges shaded and shadowed. Once we get over to this piece, you can see fully on top of the entire densities that are already there, we have that darker gray, and then that the edges are added with additional dark gray. And then we have a full density dark gray behind the head over here, which makes up the background behind the character. Then we come in and we'll see multiple overlap satins in the brown for the garment, kind of the shirt, leather shirt that's on the guy. Once again, 3 overlapped satins so that we get that ridged look in the kind of armor on the chest. We get into the gold, and you're also going to see this, tabs. You guys know how I talk about tabs. If you need to go back up and connect to something that's supposed to look like it's under another stroke, but that entire stroke has to run later, well, one of the ways we achieve that is by adding a tab that allows us to run a design over a piece, but then come back and connect to it and make it look continuous. You'll see what that means in a moment. We go through this piece, we do tabs, we leave gaps, and it allows us to run on top of things. In this case, we're going to run on top of that piece right there. Luckily, this has a gap, so it could have looked continuous anyway, frankly. But we have that tab in there, and we're running center out still, as a cap should. Now, in this case, the trident does kind of come in from the side. It is very hard to fill out without jumping. In this case, I decided that it wasn't going to be a problem to run it toward the center without a jump. There's our trident. Now we do the trident sections at the bottom, and we move up toward that center. And then we start building up from the bottom. So we build our hand first, and then here's that hand in the front. And I'm going to go ahead and put that back into a 3D view for you for a second so you can kind of see this better. We've built up those layers in that outer kind of wave border. We go build up our trident. Then there are those pieces in the armor that are in that brighter silver. There are the fingers of the hand and that big split satin or auto split hand there, still done in multiple sections. Then we have all the fingers and the thumb making up the upper hand. And then we have the neck is a satin. And then there is that curved fill with the large edge, the large minimum for the edge, and then a manual stitch just dropped in very roughly. Great if you're somebody who's a pen digitizer, use your pen for doing organic stuff like that shading, and that's just done on top of the bicep. Then we see the 3 satin stitches that are making up that central brace. You'll see that the center one goes on top so that it looks like it's the closest to us. It builds up the density and it builds up the dimensions so that the hand piece looks like it builds toward the center and builds up toward the top and is high in that center. We do the same thing on the forearm, but you will see that I'm building up that crossbar for the wrist before I get further into the rest of the piece. And I think I'll zoom in for that and we'll replay that again. Let's go back and see that piece. So there are the 3 satins for the back of the hand, and then the 3 satins that make up the wrist are actually done with the middle satin on top. After that crossbar fills in, kind of that shows the real wrist joint. Then we have the back area. We have that one transverse kind of ridge on the back that finishes off that kind of brace, that bracer. After that, we're going to get up to the helmet. So I'll go ahead and zoom back out and let you see the helmet building itself up here. You'll see that the spikes on the top run first, and then we have a curved fill making up the helmet. And then we have the edge on the helmet. What you're also going to notice is earlier that I did place the satin that's eventually going to be the eye. And in a very rare kind of sequencing for me, I left a void for the eye in the final black layer. And that was for efficiency's sake. I left that final black layer entirely for the last. So let's go ahead and show the entire design one more time. And you'll see that before we get to that black layer, everything else is laid out, including the satin stitch that will eventually become that eye. So let's go ahead and run through the black. And mostly you're just going to see me taking tours of double runs through everything, but I've used some manual stitches and a satin to make up the area surrounding that slit of an eye that's here, and then the area in the helmet that is dark. Then we go do all of our detail stitching. You're going to notice the spaces left for push compensation as well. Then we go back through this in tours, only 2 passes over any given line. Then back toward the outside and back all the way around to the finish. So there it is. That is the way we constructed the Titans logo. Let's go ahead and play through it one more time just for you to see it without all the commentary and stopping. Let it go ahead and build itself up from the basis to the light gray, to the dark gray, into the shirt, the border, the trident, which breaks the border, as we can see, so it has to be on top of those border elements, the hands, neck, and arm, shading, bracers, which are in a different gold than the border, by the way, helmet, detail, all your outlining, and that's the end. So there it is. That is the Titans logo broken down. Like I said, it's not maybe the most detailed logo. I see choices that I would have definitely made differently here, given how it turned out. I'm not very unhappy with it. I think the final look is good. It's not perfect. Like I said, there's stuff I would change about this now. I can see some sequencing things that aren't exactly what I would want, but overall, I feel pretty happy with it. So if that's something that you like, hopefully you enjoyed that replay. The last thing I'm going to do, I think I'm actually going to leave out, and I hate to say this, I know you guys really wanted to see, somebody really wanted to see me do the gradient work again. To be quite frank, my voice is starting to tank out, and I think we've done this gradient thing several times. What I would like you to tell me is, if you want to see the gradient thing, if you want to see me run through these gradient examples one more time now, and I will, once again, I'll show you what I'm talking about briefly just to say, hey, they exist, and I'll replay them, but I'm not going to do the big examples. This is that rainbow blend of the K that is manually done to create a multicolor, 7-color blend in a very small space that's at a single density. I know that's interesting to some of you guys. Certainly, I can talk about the fact that it's laid down in individual layers manually. This particular piece was punched manually, and I do mean punched, 1 stitch at a time. It's interesting how these are put together. And we also have the multi-layered version that was done for Chavis Firewood that is multiple layers of fill. I'm happy to do that again. And in fact, we can replay it really quickly. But if you want me to tackle manual blending again for gradients specifically, I'm happy to do it. I'd like comments on it. Send me your comments. Tell me that you want this because it's got to be for viewers. It's got to be something that makes sense because I've done this as a class several times. I've done this on this channel several times. If you want me to tackle it again and take more questions, I'm happy to do it. But it's one of those things where I'm like, all right, guys, if you really, really want this, I will do it again. But the level of detail in which I do it, I think I would probably want to really tear this apart and talk about how I prepared the art for it and everything, and really just do pretty much the prep on each one of those pieces entirely. So this piece, and then the one for Chavis Firewood, which is done in a very different way with multiple layers of fill, where we actually build up with 4 layers of each color. I've showed this example many times. If you just want me to break down these 2 examples in extreme detail, I'm happy to do it, but I want someone to ask. Because if it's just about getting the replay, I'll just let you know. This is me drawing this manually, stitch by stitch. I laid down a fill and I drew and said, okay, in this one, every piece is there. In this one, it's 1 out of 3. In this one, it's 1 out of 4. In this, or 1 out of 4, 1 out of 3, every other one. And I just kept on drawing that. And I skipped lines in a fill at density. That is what I did for each color. And I established where the colors were by looking at the art and spotting these points kind of equidistant on an angle. I can explain it more, but this is a massive undertaking to explain it. If you want it, it'll be a whole show. Tell me that you want it. Because otherwise, I think that this is something where, yes, I've taught it before. Go look up the existing pieces. If you just wanted to see the replay one more time, here's the replay. I'll show it to you with 3D, but the 3D actually kind of wrecks the blending because it never looks quite as thin as the actual piece, but you can kind of see where it's coming from. If you want to see it again, by all means, I'll explain it, but it is one of those things where it takes an entire hour to really go over it. And I've taught it as a class where this section of the class was about an hour and a half. So if you want me to do that, I will do it. But I think I'd rather than rush it today, I think what I will do is just let that be a thing where we do this for another episode. At least I will show you once again those run throughs and say, hey, this is how it was, this is how it was done, certainly. But it is one of those things where once you kind of know how it's done, it can be evident, but it doesn't make it faster or easier. It makes it obvious to you how it was done. You still have a lot of work to do, and there's still a lot of rules about the kind of designs for which this process works and the kinds of designs that won't work for. And that means that it is only of use for the particular use case where you want these gradients. Certainly, we can talk more about shading in different ways, and I have done more discussion on shading, much to the point of like the stuff that's on the Titans logo, where we're just adding shading for detail inside of a piece that needs some, gradient of color, but not this very specific thing of these blends that make something perfectly blended. As you can see, they are interesting to watch them go down, but I'm going to say, to get a single density, and this is the other important thing, not layering a bunch of stitches on top of each other so it gets heavy. To get a single balanced density, multicolored gradient in a very small space takes a fair amount of time and a very careful hand, whereas pressing, a sublimation into the same spot or using some other method is very cheap and easy, but requires, additional processes. So if you guys want to see that, I'll do it, but I was originally going to add it to this. I think we're going to let that be another show again. We can call it Gradients Revisited, and I think maybe in the next couple weeks I'll do that. Suffice it to say, thank you guys for showing up for today. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. We now know what happened. Going to have to move. But we're going on a new adventure, and my lovely wife is an absolute rock star and was selected for all the merit that she absolutely has. So I'm glad that she's going to be getting into that world, but it does mean that I might have to move things around. What's happening in looking ahead? Well, I'm going to keep doing this show, but there's probably going to be some disruptions in the near future. I'll try and make it worth your while in the meantime. And if not, I'll let you know if I can. And as far as choosing vector and raster software, if you have something already that works for you, awesome. Otherwise, think about compatibility with other people's files, whether it's your customers or where you're going to send those files off to. Think about your cost of ownership. Do you want to pay for a consistent membership, or you want to pay once and keep it until it's time to upgrade something major? Think about your ease of use. How easy is this for the process that I specifically do? And then your primary purpose. If it's just art for me, if I'm just drawing, then maybe it's less important than if I'm taking in customer art. As far as redrawing customer art, that is super easy, and I'll give you one more time the magical keys to what I think is worthwhile for redrawing customer art. Might as well. This is when you should redraw customer art, and I'll go ahead and bring my banners right out of it. Uh, when should we redraw customer art? When the needs of the garment or the embroidery as a medium necessitate the major alterations. When the art is of poor quality, we can't see what's going on, or we really don't have everything we need to digitize, or when the customer requires some printed materials and we can sell that on as a process. That's when we redraw it. That's when it makes sense to us. Though I will say, hey, if it's something that you have trouble with, the art is difficult for you, it might be worthwhile to you. So suffice to say, that's what's going on. If you don't hear from me in any other way, you'll hear from me about what's going on next week. I thoroughly plan to have a show, and it might be the gradient show because it seems like you guys actually do say you want the gradients. Thanks for all the wonderful comments, and thank you for being here. But until then, get out there, try some stuff out, try a couple of software demos, see what makes sense for you. Do some embroidery by all means, try some new techniques, break down a design like I just did. Find a design you love, look at it, see where it's coming from, notice the angles, notice the stitch types, notice the sheen, the shine, the types of things that were done, the layering, what order they were done in, and make some notes for yourself. Do some design analysis, and by all means, take time, make time to play, try some stuff for yourself, give yourself the grace you need, the space you need to get things done, and get some embroidery in there and find the love in what you do. All right, folks. Glad you were here. Glad I was here. And I can't wait to do it again next week.